My name is Emily Carter. I'm writing this story down not to scare anyone. Honestly, I've spent almost 3 years trying to forget it. But some things only come back clearer the harder you try to bury them. Especially around 3 a.m. when everything around you gets just a little too quiet. Back then, I was 24 years old, living in a small town in northern Missouri. I worked the night shift at a gas station and convenience store right off Highway 12. People around town called it Station 12. During the day, there was nothing creepy about the place. Truckers stopped for gas. Old men came in for coffee. High school kids bought soda after class. But after midnight, the entire place felt different. The store sat almost completely isolated from town. Behind it was an abandoned cornfield that hadn't been touched in years. To the left was a dirt road leading into a small patch of woods. Across the highway stood an old line of streetlights, some flickering, some dead. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. At first, I actually liked it. The pay was better than daytime shifts, there were fewer customers, and I could study online or watch videos when things got slow. The manager's name was Mark, a guy in his 50s. On my first day, he only gave me a few simple rules. Don't leave the counter for too long. Never open the back door at night. If someone stands outside without coming in, ignore them. And the last one, if the landline rings at 3:17, don't answer it. I thought he was joking. I even laughed and asked, why exactly 3:17? Mark stared at me for a moment before saying, just remember it. I figured it was some dumb scare tactic for new employees. The first week passed pretty quietly. Most late-night customers were truck drivers, drunk locals, or teenagers passing through. Some nights, nobody came in for 2 straight hours. But I started noticing something strange. Every night after 3 a.m., camera 4 would glitch. Camera 4 pointed behind the store, toward the dumpsters and the locked back door. Whenever I looked at the monitor, the image would twitch slightly. Not completely cut out, just enough to look like weak signal interference. I mentioned it to Mark. He just said, that camera's old. But it felt weird because every other camera worked perfectly fine. Then, on the 8th night, the first thing happened. Around 2:50 a.m., a man walked into the store. He wore an old brown jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. I remember it clearly because even though it wasn't raining outside, the shoulders of his jacket were damp, like he'd been standing in heavy fog for a long time. He didn't buy anything. He just slowly wandered through the aisles. I asked, can I help you find something? He didn't answer. I started feeling uneasy, but I didn't want to cause problems. I pretended to look at my phone while occasionally glancing up at the cameras. He stopped at the snack aisle and stood in front of the cookies, completely still, for a very long time. Then he turned his head toward me. Not his whole body, just his head. I couldn't see his face clearly beneath the brim of the cap, but I had the horrible feeling that he was smiling. A tiny smile, like he knew I was starting to get scared. I was about to hit the button to call Mark when the man finally walked up to the counter. He placed a canned iced coffee on the register. I scanned it. $2.19. He handed me a $5 bill. When I opened the drawer to grab his change, he leaned a little closer and spoke softly. You're new here, aren't you? I froze. Yeah. He nodded slowly. Then he said, guess they haven't told you about the girl before you. I looked up. What girl? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared past me toward the storage room door. Then he said, don't answer the phone when it rings. A chill ran straight down my spine. I asked, who are you? He picked up the coffee. Before leaving, he looked directly at me and said, the first time, it only calls to see if you're there. Then he walked out of the store. I immediately looked up at the front camera monitor, but the camera never showed him leaving. The automatic doors had opened. The bell above the entrance had rung. But on the footage, nobody walked through. I rewound the recording. From a moment he entered the store, there was no footage of him on any camera. Only me, standing behind the counter, talking to myself. And right then, the landline phone started ringing. I looked at the clock. 3:17 a.m. I froze behind the counter. The landline kept ringing steadily. Not loud, But in the empty store at that hour, it sounded like it was coming from every direction at once. I remembered exactly what Mark had told me. If the landline rings at 3:17, don't answer it. So I didn't. I slowly backed away from the counter, staring at the old black phone sitting beside the register. It rang exactly 7 times, then stopped. I finally exhaled, but before I could calm down, camera 4 suddenly glitched hard again. I looked up. Behind the store, beside the dumpster, someone was standing there. The image was blurry, but I knew there was a person. Tall, thin, facing the back door. I couldn't see their face. I told myself it was probably some drunk customer, maybe a homeless person, maybe a truck driver taking a break. I grabbed the internal radio and tried calling Mark, even though I knew he was asleep at that hour. No answer. I locked the front entrance using the electronic switch beneath the counter. Then I waited. The figure didn't knock, didn't move, just stood there. I stared at the monitor for nearly 5 minutes. Then the image flickered one more time, and the person disappeared. Not to the left, not to the right, just gone from the frame. I didn't go outside to check. I stayed behind the counter until 6 a.m. When Mark arrived to relieve me, I told him everything. About the man who bought coffee, about how the cameras never recorded him, about the phone call at 3:17, about the figure behind the store. Mark listened in silence. And what bothered me most was that he didn't seem surprised at all. He only asked, "Did you answer the phone?" I said no. He nodded. "Then you're okay." I stared at him. "What do you mean okay? What the hell is going on here?" Mark looked out through the front window. By then the sun was already up and traffic had started moving again. But his face still looked tense. He said, "Before you, there was another night employee named Rachel. She answered the phone." I waited for him to continue, but all he said was, "After that, she quit." I knew he was hiding something. The next night, I almost called in sick. But rent, car payments, tuition, all of it dragged me back. I told myself I only needed to survive a few more weeks. Just a few weeks. That night, I arrived earlier than usual. I checked the back door. Still locked tight. I checked every camera. All normal. I even kept my phone beside me with 911 already pulled up. From 10 p.m. until around 2:30 a.m., nothing happened. A few customers came in for cigarettes. One truck driver bought coffee. A young woman asked for directions back to the highway. Everything felt so normal that I started thinking maybe I'd overreacted. Then at 3:10, the lights flickered once. Not completely out, just a quick blink. I checked the clock. 3:11. That's when I heard knocking. Not from the front door, not from the back door, from inside the storage room. 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. The storage room was directly behind the counter, less than 15 feet away. Inside were boxes, bottled water, toilet paper, and the electrical panel. I remembered locking that door at the start of my shift. I called out, "Hello." No answer. I looked at the storage room camera feed. Black screen. I switched the input. Still black. Then the knocking came again. Slower this time. Knock, knock, knock. I grabbed the flashlight beneath the counter. My hand was shaking so badly the beam trembled across the floor. I didn't want to open that door. But what if someone was actually trapped in there? What if it was a thief? What if somebody needed help? I slowly walked toward the storage room, step by step. When I was about 3 feet away from the door, I heard a voice inside. A woman's voice. Very soft. "Emily." I nearly stopped breathing. Nobody at work knew my name except Mark. The voice spoke again. "Please open the door." I stepped backward. "Who are you?" Silence. Then the voice answered. "Rachel." I didn't know what to do. I just stood there with the flashlight pointed at the doorknob. Then the voice inside started crying. Not loudly, just soft little sobs. "Please," it's standing behind me. Right then the landline rang. I spun around. The wall clock read 3:17. The crying inside the storage room stopped instantly. Then Rachel's voice said, very calmly, "Don't let it know you can hear me." The phone kept ringing. Once, twice, 3 times. I backed away toward the counter. I didn't answer, but this time, the ringing didn't stop after 7 rings. It just kept going. And from inside the storage room, I heard something begin scratching softly against the inside of the door. I don't know how long I stood behind the counter. Maybe a few minutes. Maybe longer. The phone kept ringing. The scratching inside the storage room continued. Very soft. Very slow. Like fingernails dragging across wood. I tried calling 911 from my cell phone. No signal. I looked up at the security monitors. Every camera feed was frozen. Except camera 4, the one behind the store. On the screen, the back door was open. But I knew that was impossible. I had checked the lock myself. I'd bolted it from the inside. Outside the back door on the monitor, there was only darkness. No dumpster, no back wall, no concrete ground. Just a thick black void, like the camera was pointed into a room with no end. Then, from inside that darkness, a hand slowly rested against the edge of the doorway. I didn't scream. I think at that point my body had gone past fear and stopped reacting entirely. The landline stopped ringing. The scratching at the storage room door stopped too. Everything went silent. Then the receipt printer beside the register started running. It printed out a slip by itself. I watched the paper slowly slide out of the machine. There were no items listed, no prices, just one sentence. "You've stayed too long." I stumbled backward into the cigarette shelf behind me. And right then, the storage room door opened. Not violently, not like in a horror movie. It simply cracked open a few inches. Enough for me to see the darkness inside. I pointed my flashlight toward it. The beam didn't reach far. It was like the light got swallowed the moment it touched the doorway. Then I heard Rachel's voice again. But this time, it wasn't coming from inside the storage room. It was coming from the landline phone, even though the phone wasn't ringing. Even though the receiver still sat untouched in its cradle. "Emily, don't look at the cameras anymore." I didn't listen. I looked up at the monitor. Camera 4 was no longer pointed at the back door. Now it was filming me from inside the storage room. I saw myself standing behind the counter, pale-faced, gripping the flashlight. But the horrifying part was, behind me, on the camera feed, stood a woman. Very close. Her hair hung wet across her face. She wore the exact same gas station uniform I did. And the name tag on her chest read, Rachel. I spun around. Nobody was there. I looked back at the monitor. She was still standing behind me. And she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at something above my head. Slowly, I looked up. There was a small ventilation grate in the ceiling above the counter. And from inside the darkness behind the vent, something was staring down at me. I couldn't see a face. Only 2 spots darker than the darkness around them. Then a voice whispered right beside my ear. "So this time, you heard it." I ran. I don't remember unlocking the front door. I only remember the automatic door chime, screaming over and over as I burst outside. I ran across the gas pumps all the way to the edge of the highway. A truck passed by. I waved my arms like a maniac until the driver stopped. He later told police my face was white as paper, and I kept repeating the same sentence. "It's inside the store. It's inside the store." The police arrived about 20 minutes later. They searched the entire gas station. Nobody was there. The back door was still locked from the inside. The storage room was empty. The cameras were working perfectly. But when Mark arrived, I saw his expression change the moment he looked at the receipt printer. I asked him about Rachel. At first, he refused to answer. Then, while the officers stepped outside to talk to the truck driver, Mark finally spoke quietly. "Rachel didn't quit." I stared at him. He swallowed hard. "She disappeared during a night shift. 3 years ago. Exactly at 3:17. I quit that same day. And less than a month later, I moved away from town entirely. But there's one thing I never told the police. When I got home that morning, I found a folded receipt inside my jacket pocket. I don't remember taking it with me. Printed on it was the transaction time. 3:17 a.m. And underneath, it was another line. "Your next shift starts tomorrow night." Story number 2. The woman who always called at 4:11. My name is Jason Miller. I used to work the night shift for the emergency dispatch center of a private security company in Oklahoma. Not 911. We handled alarm signals from homes. warehouses, convenience stores, private security camera systems. If a motion sensor went off in the middle of the night, the signal came to us first. Then we decided whether or not to contact the police. The job sounded stressful, but honestly, most of the time it was boring. 90% of alarms were false alarms. A cat jumping onto a counter, a homeowner forgetting to disable the system, windows rattling during heavy wind. That's why the overnight shift usually only had 2 operators, me and Lisa. Lisa was a few years older than me, smoked constantly, and practically lived on coffee. She once told me that if you work there long enough, every camera eventually shows something weird right before sunrise. I thought she was just trying to freak out the new guy. The dispatch building sat on the outskirts of the city. 1 floor, no windows in the back. At night, the place was dead silent. The control room only had 2 rows of security monitors, the phone system, the server racks, and a hallway leading to the break room. My shift ran from 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. The first night was completely normal. The second night too, until 4:11 a.m. on the third night. A call came through the internal line. The screen displayed, unknown client. I put on my headset. Sentinel Security Dispatch, this is Jason. No answer, only faint static, like wind blowing across an old phone microphone. I repeated myself. Hello. Still silence. Then I heard a woman's voice. Very soft. Don't hang up. I sat up straighter. Her voice sounded wrong. Not like someone calling from a normal phone. It sounded distant. Hello. Like she was speaking from the far end of a long hallway. I asked, what kind of assistance do you need? No answer at first. Just breathing. Then she asked, can you see me? I assumed it was some prank call. I was about to disconnect when Lisa looked over from the desk beside me. Her face went pale. She asked quietly, the 411 call. I nodded. Lisa immediately stood up, walked over, and pressed the mute button on my headset. Hang up. I frowned. Why? She didn't answer. She just stared at the call screen like she'd seen it before. Then something came through my headset. Not loud, but loud enough for both of us to hear. Someone lightly tapping on glass. Knock, knock, knock. I turned and looked around the dispatch room. There were no windows. No one there. The tapping came again through the headset. Closer this time. Then the woman's voice returned. You really can't see me. A chill ran through my entire body. I looked at Lisa. She spoke fast this time. Jason, hang up. Right now. I did. The call disconnected. The entire room went dead silent. I forced out an awkward laugh. What the hell was that? Lisa lit a cigarette, but her hand was visibly shaking. Then she asked, did she ask if you could see her? I nodded. Lisa stayed quiet for a long time, then finally said, if that number calls back, don't answer it. I asked, who is she? Lisa glanced toward the rows of security monitors. No one knows. I thought she was overreacting until I checked the call logs. The system showed no incoming call at 411. No number, no data, no connection history, as if the call had never existed. That's when I started feeling uneasy. About 20 minutes later, I got up to grab coffee from the break room. The hallway leading there was short, maybe 30 feet long. Harsh fluorescent office lights buzzed overhead. As I passed the server room, I heard something inside. The cooling fans were running loudly, and underneath them, something that sounded like breathing right beside the door. I stopped walking. The breathing stopped too. I still remember exactly how that hallway felt. Colder than usual. Not air conditioning cold. Damn cold. Like standing near a basement. I told myself Lisa's story was just getting into my head. So I kept walking and got my coffee. When I came back into the dispatch room, Lisa was staring at the hallway security feed. Her face was completely white. I asked, what happened? She didn't answer. She slowly pointed at the screen. I looked up. The hallway camera was replaying footage of me walking to get coffee earlier. I watched myself pass the server room, then stop at the door, standing there for a few seconds. But that wasn't what scared Lisa. It was what stood behind me. A woman, long hair, wearing a dark dress. Standing so close behind me, she was almost touching my back. But at that moment, I hadn't seen anyone there at all. And the worst part was, on the camera feed, she was staring directly into the lens, smiling, while her head tilted sideways at an angle that looked like her neck had been snapped. Then the camera feed glitched violently. The image disappeared. An internal phone started ringing again. The system clock read, 4:11 a.m. Lisa didn't let me answer the second call. She rushed over before I could even touch the headset and yanked the phone line out of the system. The ringing stopped instantly. But what made my blood run cold was the call screen was still there. Unknown client. 001, 002, 003. The call was still active even though the phone had been disconnected. I looked at Lisa. She was staring at the timer like it was the most terrifying thing in the room. Then she pulled me away from the dispatch desk. Don't stand near the system. I was starting to get irritated. Why don't you explain what the hell is happening? Lisa stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then she said, 3 years ago, there was another operator named Megan. At that point, I was getting sick of this pattern. Every overnight job had the same story. There was always someone before you, and something always happened to them. Lisa told me Megan used to work the overnight shift alone. One night, she answered call at 4:11. After that, Megan started saying she could see a woman appearing on the security cameras. At first, the woman was always far away, in the parking lot, outside the hallway, at the end of dark corridors. But every night, she appeared closer, until the final night, the camera showed her standing directly behind Megan. Then the entire system lost signal for about 3 minutes. When the cameras came back online, Megan was gone from the dispatch room. No one ever found her. I immediately asked, "What about the police?" Lisa gave a bitter laugh. They assumed she ran away. And what do you think? Lisa didn't answer. She just looked at the clock. 4:26 a.m. We still had over 2 hours left in the shift. At that point, I didn't want to stay in that building another minute. Then the alarm system went off. A furniture warehouse on the south side of the city had triggered a motion sensor. The camera feed automatically popped up. The warehouse inside was completely dark. No one there, but the motion alert kept triggering. I zoomed the camera in. Nothing except shelves and storage racks. Then, at the far corner of the screen, something moved. A woman-shaped figure crossed the frame incredibly fast. I immediately rewound the footage. Nothing. Lisa was standing behind me now. Very quietly, she whispered, "It's starting." I turned to her. "What's starting?" Before Lisa could answer, every light in the dispatch room suddenly shut off. The monitors stayed on, but the entire room was drowned in the pale blue glow of the screens. I heard a relay click somewhere inside the server room. Then every camera in the system switched to the exact same feed. The hallway camera, not the one outside the hallway. The one mounted at the very end of the hallway, facing back toward the dispatch room. I could see myself and Lisa standing beside the control desk. But at the far end of the hallway behind us, there was a woman standing there, hair covering her face, head tilted unnaturally to one side, her left hand dragging slowly along the wall. I spun around in real life. The hallway was empty. I looked back at the monitor. She was closer now, not walking toward us, more like the frame itself had shifted her position. Lisa started crying. It was the first time I'd ever seen her genuinely terrified. She kept whispering, "Don't look at her face." Then the headset on the dispatch desk turned on by itself. No one touched it. And through the earpiece, I heard the woman's voice again, this time much clearer than before. "Jason." My entire body locked up. The voice was close, way too close. "You can see me now, can't you?" The camera feed flickered. The woman in the hallway disappeared. Then a hand touched my shoulder from behind. Story number 3. The man who always appeared on the freezer cameras. My name is Ryan Walker. When I was 27, I worked overnight shifts at a 24-hour supermarket outside a small town in Pennsylvania. If you've ever worked a night shift in a grocery store, you know the feeling. During the day, the place feels completely normal. Kids running around shopping carts, pop music playing nonstop, people arguing over coupons. But after 1 a.m., the store feels like a completely different place. Every sound echoes louder. Every aisle feels longer. And the security cameras start making you uncomfortable for no clear reason. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Most of the job was restocking shelves, checking expiration dates, moving pallets into storage, refilling freezer sections. The overnight crew only had 4 people. Me, Miguel, Sandra, and the overnight manager, Howard. Howard was close to 60. Quiet guy, always carried an old radio clipped to his belt. On my very first night, he told me something weird. If the freezer camera starts glitching, don't go in there alone. I thought he was joking. I even laughed and said, "What? There's a ghost in the freezer." Howard didn't smile. He just stared at me for a few seconds and went back to checking inventory like he never heard me. Later, Miguel pulled me aside and whispered, "The old man's obsessed with what happened to Eddie." I asked who Eddie was. Miguel said Eddie used to work nights there about 2 years earlier. One night, Eddie disappeared in the middle of his shift. Nobody ever found him. The police assumed he ran off because some personal belongings were missing from his car. But everyone who worked at the store knew something about it wasn't right, because the last footage ever recorded of Eddie showed him standing inside the freezer talking to someone, even though the camera never captured another person. At the time, I thought it was creepy, but not enough to actually scare me. Until about my 3rd week working there. Sandra had called in sick that night, so it was just me, Miguel, and Howard. Around 2:40 a.m., Howard told me to go down to the freezer storage and bring up another pallet of frozen chicken. The freezer was behind the store, past 2 massive steel doors. Temperature stayed around -10 degrees. I hated going down there, not because of the cold, because of how unnaturally quiet it felt. The refrigeration units constantly hummed overhead, but besides that, there was almost no sound at all. Even your own footsteps felt swallowed up. I pushed the pallet jack into the freezer. The second I opened the outer door, I noticed the lights inside flickering. Not fully going out, just twitching on and off. I remember thinking, great, classic horror movie setup. I pulled the door open and stepped inside. Freezing air slammed into my face. Rows of metal shelves stretched almost to the ceiling, packed with frozen food crates like some endless maze. I checked the inventory list and started looking for the right pallet. Everything was normal until I heard a sound. A tiny metallic clink. Clang. Like someone accidentally bumped into a shelf at the far end of the freezer. I froze. Howard? No answer. I figured Miguel must have already come down before me. I kept pulling the pallet. Then the sound came again. Clang. Closer this time. I turned down the frozen meat aisle. Nobody there. But something started feeling wrong. Like I wasn't alone anymore. That deep instinctive feeling. The kind where you walk into a room and somehow know someone is watching you before you ever see them. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. Right then, the freezer lights shut off completely. Pitch black. I stood frozen for a few seconds. Then the backup system kicked in. Dim red emergency lights flickered on across the aisles. The entire freezer turned into this dark crimson maze that made everything look distorted and wrong. My radio crackled. Howard's voice came through. "Ryan, yeah, you still inside the freezer?" "Yeah." The lights just went out. A few seconds of silence. Then Howard asked, "You went down there alone, right?" I was still goosebummed. "Yeah." The radio went quiet again. Then Howard said, very slowly, "Then who's standing behind you?" I spun around. Nobody there, but at the end of the aisle behind me, a figure had just stepped back around the corner. I only caught a glimpse. Dark blue store uniform. Male build. Extremely tall. Slight limp in the left leg. I shouted, "Who's there?" No answer. The radio exploded with static. Then Howard practically screamed, "Get out of the freezer now." I still didn't understand what was happening, but I immediately started dragging the pallet toward the exit. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Clop. Drag. Clop. Drag. Like someone dragging one leg across the frozen concrete floor. I turned around again. Nobody there, but something made my heart nearly stop. On the thin layer of frost covering the floor, footprints were appearing, one at a time. like an invisible person was walking toward me. Clop. A fresh footprint pressed into the frost. Clop. Another one, coming straight toward me. Then my radio started breathing. Not Howard. Not Miguel. A man's voice, rough and distorted, whispered through the speaker. "You can see me now, can't you?" And at that exact moment, the freezer door behind me slammed shut by itself. The steel freezer door slammed shut so hard the sound echoed through the entire storage room. I jumped so hard I knocked the pallet over. Boxes of frozen meat slid across the thin layer of ice on the floor. I ran for the door. The metal handle burned with cold against my hand. I yanked hard. It wouldn't open. I tried again. Still nothing. My radio crackled violently in my hip. Howard's voice shouted through the static. Ryan, answer me. I'm trapped in here. Step away from the door right now." What? Howard didn't answer immediately. I could only hear his breathing on the other end. Heavy, uneasy. Then he finally said, "It doesn't like people standing near the door." At that point, I was genuinely pissed off. I thought the old man had completely lost his mind. But before I could say anything else, the footsteps started again. Clop, drag, clop, drag. This time they weren't far away anymore. They were in the aisle directly to my left. I swung my flashlight toward the shelves. The beam shook violently with my hands. Nobody there, but the footsteps kept moving. One slow step at a time, dragging, like someone was circling me through the aisles. I started backing away. My breath turned into thick white fog in front of me. And then I realized something else. The temperature inside the freezer was dropping. Fast. The digital thermometer on the wall flickered. -10 degrees Celsius. -14 degrees Celsius. -18 degrees Celsius. Miguel's voice came through the radio. "Howard, the camera's glitching again." Howard cursed under his breath. "All the cameras." "No, just camera 9. I had no idea which one camera 9 was. Until Miguel added, "The freezer camera." I slowly looked up toward the ceiling corner. A security camera blinked weakly with a dim red light. Then the radio crackled again. Miguel's voice came through, but something sounded wrong. Quieter, farther away. "Ryan, what?" A few seconds of silence. Then Miguel asked, "Is someone standing next to you?" My entire body locked up. "No." Silence again. Then Miguel said slowly, "There's someone on the camera." I instantly spun the flashlight behind me. Nobody there. But the second the beam swept across the aisle to my right, I saw an arm sticking out from behind the shelves. Just an arm, pale skin, wearing an old dark blue supermarket uniform. Then it vanished immediately. That's when real panic hit me. "I don't see anybody." Howard cut into the radio. "Don't run." "What?" "No matter what you see, don't run." "What the hell are you talking about?" No answer. Then every red emergency light inside the freezer flickered at once. Off. On. In the instant the lights came back, a man was standing at the end of the aisle in front of me. Very tall, head hanging low, old supermarket uniform, left arm limp at his side, left leg dragging slightly across the floor. I recognized him instantly. Eddie, or at least something wearing Eddie's uniform. I couldn't fully see his face in the weak red lighting, but his skin looked so pale it was almost gray, and his uniform shirt was stained with something dark that looked like dry blood. I instinctively stepped backward. Eddie took one slow step forward. Clop. The dragging sound echoed through the freezing warehouse. I heard Miguel swear over the radio. "Oh my God, it's back again." Howard shouted, "Ryan, don't look at its face." Too late. Eddie slowly lifted his head, and the thing that nearly shattered my mind was his face wasn't complete. The mouth was twisted sideways like it had frozen while screaming. His eyes were stretched far too wide open, and inside the sockets, there were no pupils, just cloudy white emptiness. Then Eddie smiled, a slow smile, wide, far too wide, and suddenly my radio spoke with my own voice. Not Eddie's, not Howard's, Mine, but I wasn't talking. "Ryan, stay here with me." The emergency lights flickered again. Eddie vanished. I barely had time to breathe before something touched the back of my neck from behind. Freezing cold, like a hand pulled straight out of ice water. I spun around and started swinging blindly on instinct. I didn't hit anything, but I heard someone laughing right beside my ear. A quiet laugh, raspy, broken, and uneven, like someone whose throat had been frozen for far too long. That was the moment I completely lost it. I ran, even though Howard had told me not to. I sprinted through the frozen aisles, flashlight shaking violently in my hand. The dragging footsteps instantly erupted behind me. Faster now. Clop, drag, clop, drag. I could hear something slamming into the metal shelves as it chased me. But the worst part was, every time I looked back, Eddie was closer. Way closer than he should have been. The first time, he was at the end of the aisle. The next time, maybe 30 feet away. Then 20, then 10. But I never actually saw him run. Every time the flashlight beam shook, he was just suddenly nearer. I turned hard through the frozen vegetable aisle and slipped on the icy floor. My phone flew out of my hand. The flashlight spun wildly across the ground. The beams swept across the shelves. And for one single second, I saw there was more than one Eddie. At least 4 or 5 of them, standing motionless between the aisles. All wearing the old supermarket uniform. All with their heads tilted toward me. The radio exploded with static. Then Howard's voice came through. "Ryan, listen to me." I grabbed the radio. I saw him. Howard went silent for a moment. Then he said something that chilled me worse than anything else that night. "Don't let it touch your face." Immediately, the dragging footsteps sounded right behind me. Too close. I scrambled to my feet and ran again. Finally, I saw the freezer exit door ahead. I threw myself at it and grabbed the handle. This time, the door opened. I practically collapsed out into the back hallway behind the supermarket. Howard was standing there, face completely pale. He grabbed me and yanked me out of the freezer, then slammed the steel door shut behind us. The instant it closed, something smashed violently against it from the inside. Boom! The entire steel door shook. Howard immediately slammed the locking bar into place. Miguel stood several feet away staring at me, white as a sheet. I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't stand upright. Howard immediately asked, "Did it touch your face?" I don't know. Howard stared at me for a few seconds, then dragged me onto the brighter hallway lights. He grabbed my chin and tilted my head like he was searching for something. Then his expression changed completely. "Oh God." I looked at Miguel. "What? What's wrong with my face?" Miguel didn't answer. He just handed me his phone. The front camera was already open. On my left cheek, there was a pale, white handprint. Not like frostbite, more like someone's skin had been pressed directly onto my face. 5 unnaturally long fingers. And in the center of the palm, there were tiny words written like frozen condensation. "Next shift, Thursday." I quit that same morning. Howard later told me the supermarket eventually removed every camera inside the freezer storage. But that wasn't the end of it. 3 nights later, at exactly 2:40 a.m., I woke up to the sound of metal clinking in my kitchen. Clang, the exact same sound from the freezer. I went downstairs to check. Nobody there, but the refrigerator door was hanging open. Cold air spilling through the kitchen. And on the fogged up surface of the fridge door, a trail of footprints was slowly appearing, like something invisible had just stepped out from inside it.